Hello, sir. How are you?
And I saw the capital improvements and city development meeting to order. For those of you who are at home just tuning in, we're discussing the capital improvements and city development plan, which is on the internet, on the city website. And it's a exhaustive study of all the projects that took place last year, that are in planning for this year, as well as in the back of the book is a 5-year lookout for potential new projects that might come along someday. So it's really interesting reading. And we've already met with the Department of Public Works, the Water and Wastewater Departments. We've met with the Budget Administration and the City Clerk, the City Collector, Council on Aging, and the Elections Department and the Health Department, the Police Department, the Planning Department, the Fire Department. Tonight, we're going to be handling the citywide projects with Mayor Kevin Dumas. So with that, Kevin, Mayor, if you would start on page 44 of the book.
Sure.
What we've been doing is just covering a topic. If the councilors have some questions, we take them at the end of the segment and then move on to the next segment.
Sure. I have only a few projects that are in 15, 16, and 17 fiscal years. The first one that's in here is the Academy building, which we had split up into phases. Fiscal 16, 17, 18, 85,000, 63,000, and 30,000. Of course, those amounts have not been put out to bid. I do have a meeting coming up later this week and next week on this issue specifically, because we're going to be looking at to try to be able to assemble the bid to go out for the first fiscal year. So we're trying to be able to work with in-house staff to be able to put together the necessary items that we'll need to do this first phase. And that first phase, of course, is the asbestos remediation, the installation of the new fire alarm system, the rough plumbing, the rough electrical, the structural steel, and the shoring of the concrete footing. The demolition work, exterior siding on the rear facade, which was not done yet, and the exterior painting on the remaining facades. So those were all put together as prices that were quoted out by the members of the Preservation Society, which they were very great in doing for us. And of course, once the municipality gets involved, who knows what it's going to be. So we're going to start to go through and actually put some of these things out to bid so we can actually see what this is going to come in at, but still it's needed to take the next step for fiscal 16.
So Mayor, we currently have an agreement with the Preservation Society to lease the building for $1, which is a wonderful arrangement for the city because they're able to monitor the activities that go around the building, as well as have made efforts to beautify the exterior and take care of some of the interior. But my question is, when the 3 phases are done, what will the city have at the end?
The city will have at the end a structure that's going to be used by the Preservation Society for public information. So when they go through and people want to find out about how to renovate a historic property, if they want to look at some of the data and artifacts that have been collected by the Preservation Society for many, many, many decades, they'll be able to have that as a public meeting space. It'll be accessible with a handicap accessible bathroom in a building that truly is the only one of its kind in the city, which makes it extremely unique. But it will be a public meeting place to be able to be part of the preservation history of our city.
Very good. Councilor, do you have any questions on the Academy? Councilor Cook.
Thank you. Relative to the costs associated with this, Mayor, and thank you for coming in this evening,
Sure.
by the way. I was wondering if there's any grants that might be available from the Mass Historical Society. Usually in the spring they come out with some information. I know usually the amount is pretty small, but I was just curious if you've heard anything, if they're
Sure.
going to be doing that this year at all.
We have to be very careful on the specific grants because then they require you to do specific things with the
Right.
property. And in order to maintain our flexibility of what we do with that building and how we use those funds, that it actually, I found that it hasn't been advantageous at this time to use those specific dollars. We always look at different types of opportunities, but there's one in particular that we look at, and I don't think it's a good fit for this building.
Okay, good, thank you.
Sure.
Well, I'll just add a comment that based on the booking rate of the Balfour room in the public library, I think that I'm serious.
It's unbelievable.
There is a clear present
place.
need for this building to be available for meetings such as community information, community programs, community input sessions, what do they call them, charrettes, and meeting places for like the ARA or even the Traffic Study Commission or
Yeah,
others?
we have, in fact, we're gonna have a monthly meeting this Thursday for GATRA over at the Balfour Room at the library, and we alternate between one month we have it at Taunton at their headquarters, and the next month we have it at the Balfour Room, so.
I've been in that Balfour room many a times when it was
Yes.
loaded to the gills.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yes, Councilor Joe.
I just had one follow-up question along the line. Relative to the use, and seeing what the plan is there a plan somewhere down the line to have, any staff over there, like, for example, like doing custodial work, where we move over somebody when there's an event that goes on afterwards? And are they going to be, is the Preservation Society going to be responsible for, opening it up and closing, just like when we have something here, that you usually have, one of us to open up
Yeah, so
the place?
I just want to be a little bit more specific on that.
Yeah.
It's the Preservation Society's lease for them to maintain and to use the building. If they wanted to open it up for some other purpose, they're certainly more than welcome to do so. But this isn't necessary for our purpose. It's for the specifics for them. They're the ones that they actually have the lease agreement. They pay for the heat, they pay for all of the maintenance associated for the normal day-to-day costs, so to say. So if there's something, there's dirt inside the building, they clean it, just like the same agreement that we have in place with the first mayor's house, with the literacy center.
Right.
So it's the same agreement that we have set up for them, and that they take care and maintain of that.
Okay, so we're not looking at future staffing of it. It's gonna be similar to the suite house, so to speak. where
Absolutely.
We own it, but we might be letting other people use it as necessary, but we're not looking at staffing.
But it's in the hands. It's in the hands to be maintained by them, just like the first mayor's house is.
That's what I thought. I just wanna, there was some wondering about that. Thank you.
So I think we can move on to the first mayor's house.
Perfect segue. This project is one that we had to do a lot of the rotted wood replacement and the things that we've done. All that work is done, and now we need to be able to have the house actually painted. So this is the estimate that we came up with to be able to have the house painted. We'd like to get that done this year. Just pure workload-wise, it was something that we could not get to. We would have loved to have it done for the 100th, but it was just not something that we could get through the process earlier in fiscal 15. So we're looking to get to this project in fiscal 16, and that would be something that would get done probably most likely this summer.
I'll speak up for Councilor Kirby, who unfortunately could not be here due to a death in his family, but he has been singing loudly for years to get this project completed, and I'm sure if he was here, he'd have something to say, so we'll let it go at that.
Sure, we'd appreciate that. But that is something that we're going to get done this year. So the next project, at this time, we've replaced all the carpet that needed to be replaced in the first floor of Government Center. This is the remaining for the entire second floor, as listed out below. And that's something that at some point we'd like to be able to have addressed in the building. We'll be doing some minor painting this year, some offices that really, really need it. But we're also going to go through and have the carpet replaced at some point as well. Some of them are really, really worn. So that was an estimate that we had to be able to have the rest of the second floor done.
So that's a firm figure.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, we can move on into your.
This was at the request of Councilor Denley. So we had to, we agreed to put this into the capital improvement plan. I do not have an estimate on it. We just have not had the time to get to this, but it was something that was requested as a member of your honorable body. So we included it into the plan. So that's something that at some point we'd like to be able to have done and to have the ordinances recodified.
Councilor Thibodeau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mayor, I'm wondering about the last two chapters of the ordinance book.
18,
They
19.
have never been codified, 17 and 18. Is that necessary? How can I ask this question? Is it necessary for them to be codified along with the other 16 chapters? And the reason I reference it is because it's referenced in the beginning of the ordinance book that 16 chapters of the ordinance book have either been amended or at one time or another had been codified. Yet since those words were originally written, we've come up with a 17th chapter and an 18th chapter. So I guess that's the best way I can frame the question is, I'm wondering if, in fact, those other 2 chapters need to be codified as well, or if it's just the first 16 that need to have it done.
Council, I think it's the whole ordinance as a whole, and it'll pick up items like that. You know, if there's a mistake where chapters were added, no one ever thought about going back to reference the original where it said 1 through 16. It'll pick up things like that. It'll pick up things if we miss something as it related to the Department of Water, Wastewater. Well, they have been separated, so it would be the department. So it would pick up those type of technical things with a fine-tooth comb. So I think really it's the whole sweeping changes of the book. There are some minor technical little details that should be fixed and ironed out just because things were amended by the council. And it's referenced, but it's not clear. So I mean, some of those types of things, we should just do a general blanket overview. And then when that comes back to say, we need to change or amend the following sections for the following reasons, what it was before and what it needs to be. And that would be that type of check and balance all the way through to make sure that we're referencing things that are still valid. And if it's something that's not valid any longer, it should be removed, and different types of suggestions like that. So I think that that's, by doing the whole thing, you'll catch things like that, and every time you come across a sentence that references something, you should go to that section and make sure that it references what it says it does.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Next. The rehabilitation of the HVAC system. I know we have this discussion every year. Made great progress on it, especially since the building was originally built without heat. So not to get into the necessary small things. For example, this chamber doesn't have any heat. So what this entails is things that don't work on the existing HVAC system, and they're VAV boxes, variable air volume control boxes, where the damper should open and close when it gets to a certain temperature. And these are the remaining ones that have to be done. They're expensive, they're not cheap. But it does allow for the system to turn on and off per the thermostats in certain offices. So in a lot of them, they continue to run, but they're approximately, depending on the size room and how many they are, each it's about $1,200 to $1,400 each of what it costs to replace each one of these. There have been quite a few done in the building, and now they work. So this would it doesn't make the HVAC system shut off. It just changes the actual air volume, whether it's coming in the room or it doesn't. So the system's always on in the building, so it's not that it's going to cause the system to shut down, because everyone's always calling for temperatures at different times, and there's different speeds of which it calls for. So, but this will just help be able to make sure that the cooling system is working optimally. And then at certain times, we can override the system to bring in supplemental heat when we need it. Because God knows we certainly had to do that this year when it was so cold out. Many of the offices on the first floor were absolutely freezing because of the doors opening and closing all the time. But thank God spring is on the way and that cold weather is over. But we are going to be entering into more of having, yes, exactly, knock on wood, that the HVAC system overall is in good shape. It's just the actual VAV boxes that are in the ceiling that need to operate correctly.
What's up, Bert?
And that's a good price, the 22,000 is it?
Yes, it's been very, very stable. We asked for an updated price on that, and that hasn't changed.
I think we can move on.
The next one is the parking lot here at Government Center. Especially this year, I think that everyone here, for both this lot right outside the back door and once you cross over into the back lot, it has heaved all over the place. I'm hoping that, which we are in a lot of parts of the city, that once the temperatures come along, a lot of those heaves will go down, and hopefully be able to do some temporary crack sealing this summer to be able to hold it together in order to get to fiscal 17. That's our goal. If that changes and the condition changes, then we may have to take action sooner than that. But you'll see with a lot of the streets that have heaved, a lot of them have started to come back down already. and we're hoping that that happens with the parking lot out back. But this is the original surface of the parking lot from when we first opened in 1985. So it's, and this isn't for the parking lot next door, this is specifically this rear lot here on Pine Street and the police station parking lot as well. So at some point, starting the alligator crack, it's only gonna be a certain amount of time that this needs to be done, and that time is coming soon.
And so this is for stripping and
Cold planing and
cold
paving.
planing on top, yeah. Any other questions?
This is not chapter 90 eligible,
It's not, because it's a parking lot?
correct?
Can't move it out in the street, huh?
How about we name it?
Okay, how can we name
Pick up the
it?
sidewalk.
I don't want that as an accepted city street.
No matter how you cut it.
Okay. Is there
So
anything else?
I don't have a large section for this, but I do appreciate the time that you've met with all of the department heads and have listened to what they had to say about their projects. There's a lot of stuff moving, and I have to say that overall, you saw a different feel come through some of these projects this year when you look at trying to use technology to the best of our ability to change how we do things. I think a lot of the new things that came across, you saw the technology pieces in the police department, in the fire department. You saw some things that we're trying to work on in the water department to identify, the main system and those mains that are gonna need to be replaced. Certainly over the past many weeks, we saw a tremendous amount of water main breaks on Steer Street and Handy Street alone. Those are two that really go to the top of the scale. And it looks like we're gonna have to start to take some action, but they'll take in that whole study and evaluation how many breaks have been had on that street during a certain period of time, the age of the mains, and then start to be able to prioritize which ones have to be done. Not gonna lie to you, it's an expensive proposition, but it's time that we start to be able to holistically look at what mains do we have to replace. And just because they're old doesn't mean they're not good. And I think that that's a misnomer that's out there. Just because a main dates back to 1900 doesn't mean that it's still in clean whistle condition. But upon some evaluation, there may be tuberculation in lines that have brought them down to a certain size in the main. And through the testing, we'll get that information out too. Lines that are tuberculated and have been reduced from an 8-inch down to a 6 or a 4, those would be categories for replacement. That's something that we'll look at. Those lines that do not have problems, shouldn't replace them if they don't have an issue. But, the heaving that took place this season has just been absolutely, I've never seen anything like it. So the water department, particularly in concert with wastewater and the Department of Public Works, they were very, very busy making the repairs, but now in cooperation to get them all fixed, we'll probably end up having to do an appropriation request sometime over the next month or so, because those trenches, they're not just small trenches, some of them are very big, and asphalt's not cheap. So we probably will have to look at doing a supplemental appropriation of the highway division to get them some additional asphalt and contractor work to be able to get that done, certainly before the spring season is finished.
You bring up a very good point, that the capital improvements in the city are an agreement between the administration and the council to spend the money to get the projects done. And that in this book, there are some items in here that are millions of dollars that are gonna need to be bonded. And one of the councils made the request of asking the treasurer if she would appear and speak about the city's ability to bond additional funds. But that really is something that falls on your office.
That's correct.
It's really gonna come from you to say, I really think we should bond $5 million for a water tank or something like that. And I think there's some sediment, what I've heard from councilors so far, and I'm gonna try to get it into our message, that I would like to be able to tell you in our message where we think you could have an easy path for bonding for capital improvement projects. And if I could summarize the comment and the question, given the financial health of the city, which is about the best that it's been in my recent memory, do you foresee some bonding activities for capital improvement projects in the coming year?
Yeah, specifically, I can just speak off the top of my head without any notes. Specifically in water and wastewater, there will be activity over the
good.
next year. There's large projects, folks. I mean, we had
They
spoken
are
about this
large projects,
previously.
and that was the conversation that took place
Yeah.
here, is that the councils were looking at water and wastewater in particular, and saying these are massive projects, and the Wading River project that we just went through was kind of an eye-opener.
Never mind the dikes at Manchester, you know, the South Dike and the East Dike at Manchester. We will be sending down the authorization for Hoppin Hill Reservoir. I mean, I think what I would really like to do is to be able to take the council on a trip out to sea, if anyone hasn't been to Hoppin Hill. I want you guys to see the massive amount of water that that reservoir holds and where it is. Some of those beautiful scenery, just like the area around Manchester Reservoir. Hoppin Hill is very beautiful as well. It's in North Attleboro, but provides a vast amount of water, drinking water, that flows over the ground once it leaves the dam and spillway down to Manchester Reservoir, down to Luther Reservoir, that gets pumped to Manchester or goes directly to the plant. But that would be very helpful, I think, when you see these projects and you see the magnitude of the slope of that dam and spillway, and when you see the seepage and you see why those things need to be attended to. We're grappling with massive projects that have not been dealt with, that probably should have been dealt with 15, 20 years ago. They just never were. And I think they kind of used the council president's term, kicking the ball down the road, for a very long time. And that you can see that over the past number of years, the number of projects that are finally moving and things coming off, the new things coming on, and that we're changing now. We're getting into that change mode where you're seeing more technology things that are helping us do our jobs differently. We still have these other things that we're going to have to get off. Like the Oak Hill tank is going to be coming on line 2. So I think part of the challenge of what we do, of what Mr. Lacasse and I work on, is to try to weigh out when things are falling off of debt, when we can slide debt in, like we are with Wading River, for example, when we talked about when we came down for the bond authorization. We need to do those things with the rest of these projects too. So we're going to tackle some of those things in fiscal 16, where the debt load doesn't hit until fiscal 17. So we're trying to continue along that path to minimize the least rate increase possible to take care of some of these very large items, while also trying to keep along with the same borrowing terms. We want to try to borrow for the least amount of time as we can. There would be some circumstances, like when we start to embark on the high school project, that one's going to be a long-term project. It's going to be very, very expensive. Probably more expensive than anybody will realize once we get into determining what that first phase is going to be. That will be a very long-term project, but things specifically, whether we looked at the high school track and field concession project, or we're looking at these water and sewer projects, the shorter the term, the better off it is. Because we start looking at the terms of a decade. 15 years is a wonderful opportunity to be able to have things come on, have them come off, and then we can have other things throughout the cycle continue to come. Now the challenge with that is the pure dollar amount that it takes up in debt service for principal and interest payments. That's the challenge. So when you all of a sudden only finance something over 10 or 15 years, you are paying more in principal in a higher amount over a shorter period of time. However, you are saving long-term interest costs. However, again, it's going to play with that, things falling off, things coming on. Maybe we hold things in a temporary status so for example, let's just say it's a several $million project. The debt is supposed to hit in fiscal 17 for long term. Maybe it's something we'll hold and keep in short-term capacity, do a couple small pay down payments, and then go long-term by fiscal 18 or 19. So we're going to start to look at how we do these things and structure them so we can continue on the progress. Now here's the other point of it. You have to keep in mind the amount of work that is handled for a capital project is voluminous. The paperwork, the ongoing maintenance, even when you have a clerk of the works, the maintenance, the actual capital projects that we're doing now and have been doing for the past 2 years have taken a significant amount of time of me and Mr. Lacasse and the specific departments who are involved. And the reason I mention that to you is because we also have coming online the DPW Highway Division, we've got the Water Department building that's going to be built, and we're leaving one and going right into the others. So it's going to be a very time. So we can also only handle so many projects within a prescribed period of time. Municipal Building Commission, as you are aware, has been very busy. They're going to continue to be busy, so it gives them the momentum to carry on. But we have a lot of work that's coming down the line for this. So we have to be mindful of the workload as well. because there's only so much that we can handle. And I think that the city's done a great job at managing these projects, but there's only so much on the plate for one day. So we have to be kind of mindful of that and making sure that we're not steaming ahead too fast.
I'll point out two observations. I think I first became acutely aware of the man-hours that are required in capital projects for the athletic field at the high school. That was a massive undertaking in a very short period of time that was incredibly consuming for all of the administration that was involved in, including yourself.
Sure.
Attending the Municipal Building Commission meetings, I am impressed with the agendas and the timetables. And even when everything lines up just right, the potential for disaster is always there. The second observation is that I agree with you that a tour of the counselors, at least the committee, and certainly welcome the counselors, of the water department assets is in order, because I found it very enlightening when I went to the Luther Reservoir earlier this year and could see through a pipe that had rotted completely out and a pump that had not worked for years, because the other pump, that was the backup pump's been providing all the water into the Oars Pond from the Luther Pond.
At the pump house, yes.
Yeah, in the pump house, and I agree with you. The Luther Pond. I mean, no one ever goes to the Luther Reservoir, but it's gorgeous out there. You might as well be in New Hampshire. So I would welcome the opportunity, make arrangements with Linda for the committee and the councilors to go to the North Attleboro Dam and take a look at the slope. I think we've all been to the Manchester Reservoir, but if we can work that out, and I would encourage you to do that.
And it's important for the council to realize, and when we talk with our constituents as well, we are very fortunate for the water rights that our forefathers had
Yes,
gone out and searched that
Huge asset.
that go all the way into Foxborough. Not a lot of people realize that, but it's all the way to Crocker's Pond and Crocker's Dam and Foxborough. So we have two watersheds that we discussed in the past, but that's how far back the surface water rights go.
Councilor Blair, you have a question?
Just from Mr. Churchill, and he and I share the same philosophy. That water is probably the most important thing that we have in the city. And we should be protecting it, and we should be bringing it up to grade. And I agree with the mayor that some of these things have been put off for a long, long time in order to keep that water rate down. And we're going to have to bite the bullet, there's no doubt about it. But we have an asset here in Attleboro that a lot of towns around us do not have, because we do have the resources, thanks to our forefathers that thought far enough
They
ahead
really
to
did.
realize
gift.
what water meant.
That was one of the things that when Christine Milhouse first came here as superintendent, she goes, I cannot believe the extensive water rights that you people have here in Attleboro. She goes, you don't see that very often. But they really did. When they formed the town of Attleboro back in the day, their water rights that they secured for us were really out of two water basins were incredible. You don't see anything like that today. So we're very fortunate.
You're all set?
All set.
Well, I'm glad Councilor Blair brought that up, because Councilor Churchill has sent many, many times during council meetings and during the capital improvement meetings the elevated status he's giving the water department and projects, and it has rang through the rest of us. And I'll conclude by saying that a couple of years ago, when we did the councilor tour to the DPW yard, it made a big difference in trying to get everyone to understand the need to invest in the capital to keep the departments operating smoothly. So I think the tour is a great idea, and I'm all for it. And I think it's good for the councils to get out and into the field and see what's going on in departments. And they all do it individually on their own.
Right.
But something else happens when they go out as a team in a public forum. It worked also on Commerce Way, and I think you remember that event as well. So I like the idea 100%.
I think it helps put things,
Yes, it
you know what,
does.
it's not just the book. When you actually go out there and you see it,
Yes,
it
it
gives a
does.
whole different perspective,
Yes,
and to
it
say, you
does.
know what, it makes it real. And until you actually understand and see some of these things, I mean, we see the smaller things on a day-to-day basis that pop up and we just take care of, just for the jobs that we do for the 25 different departments in the city. But for when you actually see these bigger things and you see them out there, and believe me, just as we talked about in the past, it's very frustrating when you see so many vehicles that come up again and again and again. And to just now, when I'm driving around more often, and probably the same thing for you, you see a lot of the newer ones now. You're seeing them out there. I saw one of the highway vehicles this morning on the way in. So you see those types of things changing, which is good. So a lot of these, they're operating off of like the bucket truck, or they're operating out of the new plow trucks and the different highway vehicles that they have, the new rec vehicles. You see more of the fleet now being updated, so we're getting there. But again, I mean, this stuff sat for well over a decade, if not two, and things really needed a change. So those are the things that it can't be done all in one fell swoop, and believe me, I'd like to take care of this book and start a whole new one. But at least it put things into perspective, and we try to be able to move these along as quickly as we can. But I think the challenge is that we have to be responsible in what we do, and we have to try and make sure that we don't bite off too much, to be able to say, you know what, because there are things that change from year to year, and we do need capacity to be able to respond to different issues that come up, which is very important, because things change so rapidly sometimes. We really need a little bit of capacity. I don't need to get into the things of specifically in North Attleboro, but I just use that as an option because every year they're running up against the override issue. We don't have those discussions here, so I think that's really...
Sometimes 2 or 3 times a year.
That's
Because
something
it keeps coming
to
up.
take that proud
Again and
here,
again, yeah.
we
I'd like to give
do...
the floor to Councilor Cook.
Yeah, just echoing something
Thank
that
you.
Councilor Connie was saying was, during capital improvement time, as you know, in the past, but we have had other times by going out. DPW a few years ago was a great one. A few years back before that, going out to like the water treatment facility, as well as the fire station, police station, seeing some of these others. Because, it's like that old saying about one picture is worth 1,000 words. So we can read these and see the description and hear the account. So anything along that line going forward, and I think even when we've worked on some of things beyond capital improvements, but like on a lot of the downtown revitalization projects, by being able to go out there, see these things, see the area, visiting like DPW yards, and other locations where we have other projects going on, really help to drive it home that you can see it along that line. So anything that, I will say that anytime you feel that there's something coming up that you'd like us, even when capital improvements is over for this year, going forward, we think it would be beneficial to have a tour, a site visit, to actually see it, which is something other than us at the planning board, the advantage of doing site visits are great, because it does help us to understand, and then when we have calls from constituents, it can help us to better explain what's going on also. So anything like that, if we can work together on coming in.
Yeah, the 2 next big ones that'll be coming up will be the highway division and the water
Right.
department for those
Absolutely.
those two facilities that are gonna be built.
Yeah.
Highway, of course, will be first because we need to try to be in for December. So that's gonna be our major push, that we need to be into the new facility and tearing down the old one and getting ready for the new road to go through. So actually, the road's gonna be going through until they finally come to a halt, so we can tear down the building.
So we should be seeing the bid results on that building soon. Yeah.
Yeah, right, so.
And then as soon as we have them, we'll set the process in gear for all you folks to be able to have the lowest responsible bids in place and to kick off the official request for the authorization.
I know how frustrating it is for me as the chairman of the capital improvements program. I can't imagine how frustrating it is to the mayor. As you know, I stuck my nose in the compost pit this year to see if something could be done with there, and it's like so far down the line. And you see areas where maybe some improvement could take place, but there's so much need in other areas that demands so much money. Everything has gotten so expensive. It's horrible, particularly this year. They're saying, I'm reading in the studies I'm coming across my desk, that construction costs are up 20% across the year. I mean, if that continues, we are not going to be able to afford to build anything. It's very frightening and it's very frustrating. And
But,
yes, that's
Mr. Chairman, the reason for that is because when we went through the recent recession, you had smaller companies and even some of the larger companies that went out of business because there was no work. And they're in no hurry to get back into business again, because they want to make sure that everything is going to be stabilized before they go ahead and take that jump. So the ones who are remaining have raised their prices, because now there's a lot of work coming in and only so many people to do the job, so supply and demand.
We got the sticker shock on the animal shelter. And that was
Absolutely,
the first
yeah.
one where it became very, very obvious that that we were up against something bigger than us.
Yep. I think the other thing that the mayor didn't go into that we have to be cognizant of, and if Brian was here tonight, he'd already mentioned it, and that's the fact that we can only carry so much debt. And that's why the mayor was referencing when we resolve some debt, then we have an opening where we can carry some more debt. But you have to keep that equalized in order to remain, to keep your bond rating, and to keep what you would need is a cushion should something happen where you have to go out and borrow. You have to leave yourself some wiggle room in order to be able to do that should some kind of a major emergency happen, because we're responsible for 40,000 plus people, so that's always got to be there, So that's the other juggling act that you have to do when you choose the projects that you want to go forward with. Because for myself, and in my tenure here, I've seen Manchester Reservoir. I've seen the soil in that been replaced once. So it probably should have been replaced twice, but it went through the system and was replaced once.
You talk about the beds at Orr's Pond?
Manchester.
Okay.
Manchester. I don't know if you've seen it or not when it happened, but they drain it down, take it down as low as they can, and it's only 10 or 12 feet deep at its deepest point. Most of the area down there is only like 8 feet deep. But the same kind of soil replacement, it was done there with a fine sand and everything, and but I think that's recommended like every 10 to 12 years or something like that, and it's been done once since I've been here. But maintenance problems like that, or maintenance programs like that, when I first arrived here, we didn't have maintenance programs that were in force. We had emergency situations that occurred, and those are the ones that we addressed. So most everything we looked at in the capital improvement book was marked urgent, because everything was at its limit or past its limit. And Peter and I, and Frank and Brian, when Brian came on, a lot of us sat here knowing full well we didn't have 2 cents to rub together to do any of it, but we were planning. And that's what is all part of the planning process, to know what's coming up, what you have to address. But I'm a lot more happier with the amount of progress that has been made under the mayor's administration than had ever been made before with any of the prior administrations, in my opinion, anyway. I only served under one other mayor, but just following the history of the city, maybe with the exception of some of the original councils and mayors where they were taking a town and converting it into a city. That might have been, a bigger time for capital projects to go forth. But other than that, I think since Mayor Dumas has come on, we've addressed so many different projects and accomplished so many of those different projects that it's encouraging for me to look through this book, see what's been done and see what's left, and say to myself, hey, we got, this much accomplished. Whereas there were times when we couldn't say that. And so this is encouraging to me.
And actually, even along that line, a lot of things, one of the changes, which is actually helping us going forward beyond even this year, this term, a couple years down the road, has been a lot of and I know you and I have had numerous discussions about preventive maintenance,
Yes.
which has become an integral part, which was not always there. So going forward, and that also helps to make sure that the tax dollars are spent wisely.
absolutely.
So that sounds like a big compliment, and that's a high note to end the meeting.
And to keep on going, right?
Yeah,
So-
exactly.
That's right, keep it up.
So, but thank
Good
you.
job.
I appreciate the time that you put into this because it is important because this isn't something we talk about every day.
That's right.
So when you see the amount of time and the knowledge that the department heads themselves to get their hands around all the issues and to do this process, you know, this is an active plot. People think that this is just a book. It's really active because one of the first things that we talk about is the fact, is the program, is this in the capital improvement program? If it's not, why? You know, because there are very valid things that if you don't anticipate something to come up in the plan, it's not going to be in the plan, but we need to be thinking of those things, and so we need to have that as a response when we're looking at those types of things when we come down to you. So I think it's a good exercise, and it made this I think that it made the book kind of come to life for the things that we deal with every day.
I think this year also, at the request of Council Parika and for the benefit of Council Churchill, to interview all the departments again this year. I've heard several comments from people saying it's an education, you know, because
really
you
is.
wouldn't think that a water tank's a $5 million expense.
Exactly.
It is an education.
And people not knowing the fact that, you know, construction costs are gonna run you anywhere between $250 and $400 a square foot.
Right.
Depending on what
$300
you're
a square
building,
foot.
or more.
Yeah.
But it's very enlightening, because someone said, well, how can that building cost that much? And say, just so you know, that's just a functional replacement. This isn't a Taj Mahal that we're building. And they're like, really? Absolutely. And it's just based upon pure math at $300 a square foot times the dollar amount that the square footage you're dealing with is a multi-million-dollar project. And the look on people's faces sometimes, they can't believe, really, you're kidding? Say, no. So it's important that we do talk about that. Maybe I'll include that when we come down for the highway division and the water buildings, to just show, and so that way they can show it on television as well, of what it is. Very simple math, this times this equals this dollar amount. I think that's important as we go through and we educate, you know, not only you, but the city residents as well.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Second. All in favor? Aye. I declare the Capital Improvements Committee meeting closed at 5:47. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
We're meeting next Monday on that discussion. Actually, 5 or 5:30?
What's that?
5 or 5:30?
And